is Edwin K. Morris, and you are about to embark on the next Pioneer Knowledge Services Because You Need to Know, a digital resource for you to listen to folks share their experience and knowledge around the field of knowledge management and nonprofit work.
Thank you for listening to Because You Need to Know, the reference podcast in knowledge management. My name is Soni Toneme. As an art administrator, Because You Need to Know has been my go-to podcast and has helped me hone my management skills. Please consider sponsoring the podcast with your business.
God morgon, good morning, bonjour. Jag heter Leif Edvinsson. Jag bor i Stockholm och jag är väldigt intresserad av hur man gör podcasts. Så jag ser fram emot att vidareutveckla det här tillsammans med Ed and also dela det med er. In English it's called knowledge sharing. I'm pretty used to speak English as well, as I was a student in Berkeley once upon a time, and therefore I learned to use the language. I don't know if that is enough for an introduction.
What is an interesting feature around where you live?
The interesting feature is that I'm living in something called the Royal Seaport. And the Royal Seaport is the green park with ecological prototyping in Stockholm, partially owned by the Swedish royal family. The interesting thing is that it's Viking territory. So the Vikings used to be having their ships here. That's why it's also called seaport. And the seaport is also the port to the frequent ships going between Stockholm and Finland and other places in the Baltic Sea, the water that is outside my window.
So do you spend a lot of time at the beach at the Baltic Sea?
Too cold.
Unless you like really, really cold water.
Well, usually It's around 20 degrees or less. It's a good temperature for your beer.
I agree. What can you talk about for hours?
Intellectual capital. I started to talk about it some 30 years or more. Taxonomy and typology has evolved over time, and I have also evolved over time into retirement.
Intellectual capital?
Capital. It's the hidden value of your enterprise and society and city and country outside the accounting map.
Let's talk about those terms. I know a lot of people get wrapped around definitions of knowledge management, and there are those folks that just go with the concept, look up the definition of knowledge, and then look up the definition of management, and that's knowledge management. Capital, I would have to assume, not looking it up, but capital by itself has to always refer to something monetary, correct?
Nope. That is financial capital.
Tell me more.
And that's why the intellectual capital is the intangible capital, and it's usually the hidden asset because it's not so easy to pick up. And nowadays, with the intellectual property rights and the accounting system, it's becoming more and more visible. But as a financial trader, you trade on it, actually. But they don't want to reveal the way they do it. So therefore, it becomes intellectual capital as well.
Mm-hmm. Does it always refer to an organization?
No, it could be a city, it could be an institution, it could be a country. And that's why you can look upon the stock exchange. I think I sent you a slide showing that during the last 30 years, the amount of intangibles has increased, which means that the bookkeeping is less and less accurate.
How so? When you're saying accurate, that means you're saying that they are not looking at the thing full spectrum.
Yeah.
They are not looking at, they're focused on the tangibles.
Yeah.
How do you educate somebody to look at
intangible? By smelling it.
Wait a minute. Are we talking about your national drink again with really no smell?
Yes.
Come on, tell me.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Because in French, it's called bouquet. That's the smell of the wine.
Okay.
Some people actually judge it on that first smell hint, and then they drink it. And it's the same with intellectual capital to some extent, that you can get a pre-alert on the value of a medicine or a value of music or about your talent, etc., which is the intellectual capital. A lot of people are frustrated about the financial capital performance because that is based on judgment and guesswork related to the intellectual capital.
You say guesswork.
Yep.
I can't imagine too many CFOs or CEOs or COOs would like to work around the framework of guessing.
And that's why you have certified public accountants to address that. And then you are coming closer to verify how correct it is. But you can be absolutely correct, but still wrong.
So are you saying then the universe should look at developing certified knowledge accountants?
Yes, and it's going on. They have developed that initially in Sweden. We were prototyping that. And then Germany has picked it up. The ministry in Germany are actually working on annual reports with that. And that is called Wissenskapital. Wissenskapital is knowledge capital. And you can have an annual report of it. And they are doing it for hospitals as well. That is it.
That is all new information for me. That is totally amazing.
Yeah, I should tell you something new, you said.
That is a good sign of progress when you're learning something new versus standing behind something old that you're defending. So I like that. That is promising. How does the average person, non-corporate, non-organizational, but just a citizen of the planet, how do they become more aware?
A first step might be to have some quizzics. And quizzics is the art and science of questioning. It's a subject that we were working with at Lund University many years ago, but we applied it.
Can you spell that for me, please?
Quizzics, Q-U-I-Z-Z-I-C-S.
All right, I'm looking it up right now. I have never heard of that
Well,
word.
we had a professor on it, and he was also a professor in national intelligence. He developed that, and I became very curious about it, and we were applying it, and it's not that far away from Leonardo da Vinci either, because the question is a starting point. So that's why if you meet somebody later today, you can ask whether they have been appreciated according to their value, or is it the value larger or smaller? And most employees are not valued. They are giving a salary, but they are not valued.
In most corporate situations, the only value schema is a trade and exchange between time and money.
Yep.
So there's no dashboard, if you will, for identifying the value exchange.
But you have it in sport where you are trading on, for example, soccer players. Now we have seen that the value of female soccer players have gone up tremendously. That is way off versus a traditional salary level that the unions were working on.
Quizzics.
Yes, the art, how to phrase the question, and science, because to make it very simple, a good question create new synapses in your brain.
Oh, yeah. Well, so there's your value proposition, is your growing brains, your growing comprehension, your growing understanding, your growing the availability of, I keep going back to comprehension, because comprehension's the key here, correct?
Why?
Why? Because in order for understanding to happen in the human framework, comprehension has to be at some level. There has to be a level of proficiency in order to consume, understand, and then take action.
Yeah.
The fight or flight concept is pretty innate and understood. Rattlesnake run. There are certain elements that are just, you don't have to think, you respond. But responding is not always good. There's a better way, possibly, if there's time for reflection and gaining understanding.
And that's why Toyota developed a special approach on quizzics. Toyota applied it in their production line, and they have 5 why questions in a row. So the respondent, I just started the second round. I'm asking you why, and then you give a very good response. And then I could have continued and ask you why, and why, and why. And when you come to why number 5, you have in a few minutes got a tremendous depth in the dialogue.
Is it fair to say the Greeks are responsible for that whole idea?
No, they are not. I think it's somebody else.
I mean, isn't that the Socratic method? That's the one I think most people would think of, is Socrates had this ability to, in a process, to keep asking deeper questions. And that was the aim was to create a shared understanding, I think.
And that the oracle in Delphi, he was using that approach. And he asked questions. When you came there with your question, he asked the counter questions.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's that whole loop.
Yes.
It's like, just give me an answer.
Yes.
And I'll overgeneralize, but everybody just likes a simple answer. Is that really the answer?
No.
To go to quote, I think it's Occam's razor, which is the idea that maybe the simple answer is the answer, or maybe the first answer was the best answer.
And that's why the smell is so important.
Tell me, you could sniff it out?
The smell hits your brain in 0.8 seconds from the nose to the brain.
Okay.
Once you have got it there, you usually say, aha. And then you take a sip, and then you say, ah.
So what we're talking about here, everybody, is really, we're not the first people on the planet to be thinking about bigger things and really building intelligent capabilities across people and for people. And I love this train of conversation because it's not normal coffee chat. You're not going to hear it in a local pub. So this is really a focused opportunity here to come away from this conversation with appreciation for things that have happened before and our ability to learn about them in order to share and build synapses in other people.
And the methodology that has been applied in the extension of Genchi Genbutsu, which is the name of the Toyota approach, Genchi Genbutsu, but it's the 5 why in a row. And you can play with the kids on it as well, because it's great fun.
You bring up kids, and I got to say, this sounds weirdly similar to a 4-year-old with the repeat question of 5 times, which is not for deeper understanding, but just almost like automated response. To keep hitting the same wall in the exact same way does not add value. But what you're saying is you recraft the next question in order to come at it a little differently.
Yep.
You're doing a little bit of a dance.
Yes, knowledge dance. And then you can do it with different rhythm. So you get a samba or foxtrot or waltz, etc.
You know, that brings up something. As an old soldier, we were trained, if it's dim light, if it's twilight, and you're trying to see something at the distance, or you see something but you can't tell what it is. It's far enough away. It's enough that you see it, but you don't know what it is. The method that we were trained with was that you use your eyes and then you look around it and you add information by the peripheral vision. The longer you look at something direct, the less you can see it.
Yeah.
So it's the same format. It's the same ability to change your perspective in order to envelop an understanding.
Very good. Very good. That should be brought forward in the program. It's very good, actually.
So can I take over your position as the brain of the year now?
Yes. Welcome.
Hooray, I get free parking in Sweden. Yay. Yeah. Tell me what that means, the brain of the year.
It is an award handed out by a group of people, and the chairman, when I got it, chairman of the prize committee, he was also the CEO of the MI5 in UK. So he was pretty well informed about people and talents and how we act. And then I was nominated and got this award. To my pride, they say that Bill Gates was not also nominated for that year, but he got the money and I got the
award. Now his ex-wife has the money.
Yes.
So who's the organization that does it and why did they do it?
It was an organization developed by Tony Buzan, who was very much into the knowledge management dimensions. And he developed the mind map system. And British guy, unfortunately, he got ill and died. Very smart, very, very smart, actually. I was very happy to get to know him, and then he thought I should be nominated. So I was happy to get that, and it changed also my life in a sense that when I got it, I had to hire 2 secretaries to take my phone and all emails coming in every day. That lasted for 2 years.
Ooh.
Yes. Otherwise, I have drowned.
Wow. Can you say that it changed your life?
Yes, definitely.
For the better, I hope.
Yes. I got to know so many nice, intelligent people. Recently, we have also prototyped together with some of them something called Oracy Lab.
Oracy. I know that word. I was just taught that word recently. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Do you have a definition of what oracy means?
It's a kind of extension of literacy. Literacy is the words in print and for the reading. And the oracy are the words for communication, non-verbal as well as verbal. But the Oracy Club has the idea to experiment, refine, and test online Oracy Lab. And perhaps it could be something of interest for you to join into.
Absolutely. I agree. That sounds perfect, and a joint opportunity for growth. Just so everybody knows, the Merriam-Webster definition of oracy is proficiency in oral expression and comprehension.
Yeah.
Here again, that you can talk all you want, but unless the listener understands, it really is moot.
So if we switch to Swedish or French here, how much will you understand?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The first known use of that word, what would you guess the year was the first time they recorded the use of oracy?
Something like 2,000 years ago or?
According to Merriam-Webster, 1965.
Wow.
I know. That's a recent discovery.
It's probably the oracle in Delphi.
The etymology is oral, as in literacy. That's all it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't go any more than that. In my mind, I'm thinking oracle, knowledge,
But that's a nice concept, oracle knowledge. That's where the programming profession is failing.
How so?
They are using zeros and ones. And according to quantum physics, you also know that the biggest potential is in the zero. But if you take traditional math and you multiply 1 with 0, then you get 0.
Well, I think it was you that told me 1 + 1 = 11.
Yes, exactly. And it's coming from the oracle knowledge, probably.
So what's your definition of knowledge management, guru and brain of the year?
I have no good answer to that question.
That is not a good answer.
No, it's not enough. You have to ask it again. And ask why.
So if you were talking to a 5-year-old, how would you explain knowledge management works?
It is the way you know that you know. But what's even more interesting is what you don't know that you don't know. So therefore, you have a number of dimensions of knowledge management. And most of the knowledge management probably emerged when the immigrants were coming to US to work for the Ford and GM. And then they started to develop the schooling system in Boston area. They are still on that track. So therefore, they have librarians to sort out the books in a certain way, programming people. But as we said earlier, what's even more interesting is the smell. What's the smell of knowledge?
So we're talking all the dimensions of knowledge.
Yes, holistic perspective.
And as a human, we have certain elements to consume items and perceive items. And what you're saying is that knowledge should have a smell.
It has a smell, but you can also turn it into a big business like they do in the French perfume industry. They have big laboratories for it in the south of France and in UK.
Well, wouldn't the reason they exist is for making money?
Probably. They want to be on top of the question, what's a good smell?
What's a good smell? What are people going to buy?
Yeah.
What are people going to like? So here again, we're going back to the consumer. The consumer, the consumer, the consumer. So in an organization, Who should represent the consumer in an organization's knowledge?
Usually it is the customer. And that's why you have do-it-yourself dimensions of it. And you supply the components for them to grow. And that's why the value of a knowledge organization is the derivative as a multiplier.
Tell me more about that.
It means that you can actually take a good book and then you can do something with it, and you can also cook it and you can burn it, etc. But the point is that you take a step forward with it and take many more steps. And that's the multiplier function. The multiplier function is a kind of derivative where you are escalating the curve.
But the derivative itself hinges upon one's creativity to see different uses.
Yes.
So here again, we go back to the human framework as the source and diviner of derivative options. Now, I'm sure there's an AI out there that can do that for you. Great. But the AI is not going to get the smell. It's the human framework and those perceptions of creativity, imagination, vision, understanding, comprehension, and asking the bigger question of what are we missing? What's not evident?
Exactly. And that is the big value point. It's usually a navigational point. And when you combine the signals, you got the picture.
That comprehension again. Understanding, comprehension.
Yep.
There was I had a guest on it that used Lego play as an instrument to teach people to be creative and to engage in a teamwork type exercise. How valuable is it to you to have this level of play as a human instrument to all these things we've just talked about?
Extremely important. So that's why we were building Scandia Future Center as a kind of laboratory to explore what we don't know that we don't know. And for doing that, you have to reduce the fear, among others. And what we were then playing with was the smell of going into the Future Center. And when you went into the Future Center, you were greeted by the smell of freshly baked bread.
Wow. I like that.
Precisely. And you immediately reacted.
I did.
Yes.
It took me back to probably 12 years old and mom baking bread in the house. You know, it's like, wow, what a feeling. Yes. What a feeling is tied to that.
Well, nowadays it's closed down, but you can go to Tokyo. And Japan has around 50 of them.
Isn't it funny how things evolve sporadically? It seems sporadically by region, society, certain parameters. But it's almost like there's a river of consciousness that connects the planet.
Yes.
It kind of pops up over here, and then they quit doing it, but it's over there or simultaneous. And it's just remarkable as we discover and understand more of what we don't understand or comprehend.
That's why you can have a conversation with the 5-year-old and ask, what is it that you don't know? And schooling is only providing a small fraction of that.
Fraction, yeah. I studied with a Native American probably 10, 15 years ago, and he referred to me as a seeker. So in his vocabulary and understanding, that meant someone who is always asking questions, trying to gain more insight and understanding of what they don't know. And I want to leave the listeners with that idea that if you spend 80% of your time constituting what you do know, you're missing a lot of opportunity.
I had a team of seekers in Skandia, and their team of seekers was also called Future Teams, because they were searching for the question of tomorrow, not the answers of tomorrow. Mm-hmm. We're sending them around the world to pick up signals. And then we were putting that together to some conversation in the executive board. And it was very, very interesting experiment.
What was their findings?
The seekers had the signals. The perceptors of the signals were confused.
I get what you're saying. Oh, that's funny.
Yes.
Well, what would be your biggest bit of wisdom you would like the listener to walk away with today?
Well, it might be the learning from being a student at Berkeley, where I was not very happy with my grading the first semester. So I went to my professors and asked, why don't you give me better grade when I reply and quote references, etc. And they said, that is precisely your problem. Why? I said, because you are just recycling old shit.
Yeah.
So we want you to play with the signals, challenge me as a professor, and then we started the knowledge game together.
Awesome. That is brilliance. Can you recall the name of this famous professor?
Yes, I think we were three of them. Holton, who was also dean of Berkeley Business School, and then there were John Myers, who was very much into the organizational development. And then we had the third one whose name was Francesco Nicosia, who was Italian. Great team.
I want to highlight and respect this moment because what you just heard was a tip of the hat to the source of something that changed this man's life. I won't say permanently, but shifted your brain pan to think of things differently and challenged you to not be a reciting machine, but a thinking machine. That's fabulous.
Yes. And when I became professor, I applied the same. My students were very, very happy with not focusing on the recycling, but on the quest and signals and seeking.
Well, I challenge everybody to go out and be a good seeker and look for your own signals and process them accordingly.
Very good. We have three major dimensions, altitude, latitude, and longitude. And longitude is the most challenging one because it's three-dimensional. And it hasn't been with us slightly more than 100 years.
Are you saying longitude itself is three-dimensional?
No, it's the third dimension. And the navigation is based on combining those three. So space navigation is based on the discovery of the longitude, which goes back to late 1900 when the British Navy was developing the concept.
Can you give me a definition of what they defined?
It was coming from the traditional military and Navy was trying to use the old metrics, but then they realized that they couldn't return to the old spot by only having that. And that was referred to as the longitude problem. And the longitude problem was solved by a watchmaker. And the watchmaker discovered that the best way to measure it is time, because the Earth is rotating.
Well, that, and we went from flat Earth to round Earth at some point.
Yes, and the longitude is therefore the most important dimension in navigation. And the award went to the watchmaker, and then political fight started, and it took somewhere around 50 years for the European people to agree upon the node for the Greenwich Middle Time. If you look into the Greenwich Middle Time, it's in UK, and the political fight was, should it be in France, Poland, Italy, etc. And then the British Navy was somewhat stronger at that time, so they got it.
It's interesting, as I'm looking this up, the source is timeandnavigation.si.edu. And it starts with longitude problem, cash for creativity. So this is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Finding longitude at sea became urgent when European states competed for overseas empires and maritime trade.
Yep.
Starting in the late 1500s, Europe's major seafaring nations, Spain, the Netherlands, Portugal, Venetian Republic, England, and France, offered vast amounts of money to anyone who could solve the longitude problem. These empires or entrepreneurs put out a cash prize to say, hey, somebody figure this out so we can do this better.
Yeah.
Is that always going to be the motivation for change, do you think?
No, I think it's going to be something else. And that's what we have to smell.
We're looking for the next thing, because cash is not the motivator for all, for sure.
No. And that's why when the French perfume industry started to develop the molecules for a good smell, they also started to realize that these molecules could be digitalized. So just around the corner is probably digital perfume.
Well, thank you, my friend. It's been an explorative journey.
Yes, more to come. Stay tuned.
More to come. You have just finished our latest Because You Need to Know, a public service of Pioneer Knowledge Services. Please join us on LinkedIn and find us at pioneer-ks.org. If your company or organization would like to help us continue this mission and sponsor one of our shows, email byntk@pioneer-ks.org.